In the name of God the Gracious, the Merciful, all praise is to God, and peace be upon His servants whom He chose. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today's topic is about alcohol according to the Quran. It is commonly believed that in Islam, alcohol is considered haram or forbidden. But interestingly, if we open the Quran, there's nothing in the Quran that actually says that alcohol is haram. God does not use the word alcohol in association with the word haram. In fact, in 6:145, it says, I do not find in what was inspired to me forbidden, haram, to a consumer who eats it, except, and then 4 things are listed out of what is haram as far as consumption is concerned. None of these 4 things include alcohol. So the verse says, I do not find what was inspired to me haram, except these things. So it is not our right as Muslims to call something haram when God has never said it in the Quran. So as far as the Quran is concerned, alcohol is not haram. But what really struck my interest in this topic is Surah 4 verse 43, where God says, O you who believe, do not come near the salah while you are drunk, sukara, or root word sakara, until you know what you are saying. Some have said that this verse is actually an earlier revelation verse that has been superseded by later revelations in which God has gradually prohibited the consumption of alcohol. A concept known as abrogation or nasakh wa mansukh in Arabic. I have made a video about the concept of abrogation. Please watch it. I won't cover it here. But the idea of abrogation in the Quran does not exist. It has no Quranic basis whatsoever. So this idea of an early revelation superseding a later revelation is incorrect. Others have said, including myself, have said that sakara refers actually to mental distress and not intoxication. And although, linguistically speaking, sakara could refer to a mental distress, as far as the Quran is concerned, sukara and sakara refer specifically to intoxication by alcohol, like indicative of Surah 16 verse 67, where God says, and from the fruits of date palms and grapevines you derive sakara. So it's through deriving from these fruits you derive sakara. So being drunk is from these fruits, obviously a form of fermentation. So sakara in the Quran refers specifically being intoxicated from alcohol. So let's tackle this topic. Let's begin with Surah 2 verse 219. It says, they ask you about khamr. Khamr comes from the root word khamara, which means to cover and obscure the shape or condition of a thing. So it's 2 things, to cover and obscure. Say, for example, you have a ball with a piece of cloth on top of it. If you cover the ball but the shape is still known, then you have only done a cover. You have done a ghita. But if you have covered and somehow managed to obscure the shape of the ball, then this is a khamr. It's because you have covered and obscured it. This is precisely why in 24:31, God tells the women to place their khumurihinna, their khamr, onto their garment openings. He uses the word khamr because it's a cover and a form of obscuring the garment openings. And this is precisely why alcohol is called khamr, because it covers and obscures the mind and judgment. I was debating if khamr should be used as intoxication in general or alcohol, but to me it seems from the Quran that khamr is specifically referring to alcohol, as noted by the definition as well as how it's rendered, but also 12:36, God says, I see myself squeezing khamr. 47:15, and rivers of khamr delightful to the drinkers. So yes, I would render khamr as alcohol. Moreover, if you look at 1667, it says, from fruits, date palms, and grapevines you derive sakara. The Arabic word sakara means to be confused or deluded. So basically, when you have too much khamr, then you are in a state of sakara. So there's a strong association of these two words. So now that we understand that khamr is alcohol, let's read 2219. It says, they ask you about alcohol and gambling. Say, in them is great ithim and benefits for the people, and their ithim is greater than their benefit. Note here, I put between brackets a question mark for the word gambling because I'm still studying this particular word, but this still does not affect our understanding of the verse in general. They ask you about alcohol, say, in them is great ithim. The key word here is ithim. A lot of times, a lot of translators would translate ithim as sin or any form of such, and which is correct, but not in the ultimate sense. You see, in the Quranic Arabic is very precise with its choice of key words. Ithim, the word sin is very general, it's very surface. But in Arabic, ithim is different than other words of sin like khati'a or sayyi'a or any of those things along those lines. Ithim comes from the root word athama, which means a deliberate form of sinning. It's a deliberate form of sinning. It's an action-based deliberate form of sinning. It's not just sin. It's a deliberate form of sinning. It's a sin based on action. Basically, if you know that something is sinful and you still do it, that is called ithim. And the Quran is very clear about this. Like in Surah 2, verse 180. Where it says, it is decreed for you when death approaches one of you and he leaves wealth to make a testament, but whoever changes it after he has heard it, the ithim is upon those who change it. So they know that what they are doing is wrong and they still chose to do it. That is called ithim. Should someone suspect bias or injustice on part of a testator and then reconciles between them, he commits no ithim. Again, he's taking action. It's a deliberate form of action of sin. So he's reconciling between them. He's not committing an ithim. But those who are changing it deliberately are committing an ithim. Let's take another verse. Verse 283. And do not conceal testimony. Whoever conceals it, it is ithim at heart. Athimu qalbih. So again, whoever conceals it, this is a deliberate form of sinning. And a last verse that's very clear, woe to every liar, athim, root word athama, who hears God's revelations being recited to him, yet he persists arrogantly as though he did not hear them. He is committing a deliberate form of sinning. So when God says that in alcohol there is ithim, he's referring to the deliberate form of sinning. It's not just any sin. It's not just like the word haram, where it's just absolutely forbidden. He says it's a deliberate form of sin. So now that we understand that ithim refers to deliberate sin and not just any sin, let me show you something else here. God says in them is great deliberate sin and benefits for the people. We see two sides of the spectrum, a deliberate sin and benefits for the people, a seemingly paradoxical phrase. And then God says that the deliberate sin is greater than the benefit. But let's focus on this phrase really quick. He says, in them is great deliberate sin and benefits for the people. This has the same weight as Surah 57 verse 25, where God talks about iron. He says, in it there is violent force and benefits for the people. Again, a seemingly paradoxical phrase. But we know that iron is not forbidden. It is perfectly okay. It's as if God is saying that you can use the iron for violent force if you choose, or you can use it for benefits. Likewise, alcohol, God says that you can use it for deliberate sin, which you should not, but you can. You have the choice. And you can also use it for the benefits for the people. And God says that if you choose, and He says that if you use the ithim, it has a greater impact than the benefits. As simple as that. Alcohol is not forbidden in any way, shape, or form. You can simply avoid the ithim and take the benefits of it. So with all those points in mind, let's read 2219 again. God says they ask you about alcohol, say, in them is great deliberate sin and benefits for the people, and their deliberate sin is greater than their benefit. Note here he says in them. He doesn't say they are of deliberate sin. He says in them. It means that there's one aspect of deliberate sin and another aspect of benefit, and their deliberate sin is greater than the benefit. And this is absolutely true, especially for those who misuse and abuse alcohol. The ithim that God refers to is obviously the deliberate sin that is forbidden in the Quran, like violence, adultery, fornication, stealing, foul language. All these things tend to happen when someone becomes intoxicated with alcohol. You become more relaxed, and you don't have your guard on, basically. And this is precisely why in 443, God says, do not come near the salah while you are drunk, sukara, until you know what you are saying. So again, God is not prohibiting alcohol. He's simply telling us to make sure that we do not commit the ithim that he's talking about. And if we do, it has a greater impact on us than the actual benefits. That is all that God is talking about. There is no prohibition here. Another verse to address is Surah 5 verse 90, where God says, O you who believe, alcohol, gambling, altars, and arrows are rijis, from the works of the devil, so avoid it, that you may prosper. The key word here is rijis, which comes from the root word rajasa, which means to mix with something in order to make it impure. If something infiltrates into something else that does not belong in there, then that process is called rijis. And God says for us to avoid the rijis. He says rijis is from the works of the devil, so avoid it, the rijis. He doesn't say avoid them, referring to alcohol, gambling, altars, or arrows, but it refers to specifically the rijis, the impurification process of the devil's works. So what are these rijis things? Altars, for example, are not rijis on their own. Altars are perfectly fine. God is not prohibiting the altars. But when we do altars plus rijis, then that becomes haram. Altars plus impurification, which is spelled out in 5.3. Animals sacrificed on altars. That's the rijis that God is referring to. Altars on their own, not doing anything on them, is perfectly fine. But if you sacrifice animals on them, that becomes rijis. Likewise, arrows, in the same verse, God says divining with arrows. Arrows on their own are fine, but arrows plus rijis, plus the impurification, is divining with the arrows. So the rijis of alcohol and gambling is found in the very next verse, where God says that the devil wants to place between you animosity and hatred through alcohol and gambling, and to prevent you from the remembrance of God and from the adherence. Will you not desist? Alcohol on its own is perfectly okay, as we have seen. But alcohol plus the rijis that God is talking about is spelled out in the next verse. Animosity and hatred, preventing you from the remembrance of God and from the adherence. So if you drink, that is perfectly fine. But if you drink to the point of where the rijis occurs, then that is not okay. And this is also, again, as we go back to 443, is the reason why God says, do not come near the salah while you are in a state of sukara, drunkenness, until you know what you are saying. So alcohol on its own, we have seen from the other verses, is perfectly fine. But it's only when the alcohol is misused or abused that certain things start happening. The ithim and the rijis are to be avoided. So to come back to Surah 4 verse 43, where God says, do not come near the salah while you are drunk, sukara, until you know what you are saying, it is obviously that God is referring to alcohol. And it implies that alcohol is perfectly okay so long as you don't violate Quranic commands. Alcohol on its own is okay so long as it is not mixed with ithim, deliberate sin, or mixed with rijis, making something impure, as we have seen from the Quran. To conclude, The first thing is alcohol is not haram. God never associates the word haram with alcohol. The second thing is that the Quran discourages consumption if it's misused. If we have ithim or rijis mixed with alcohol, then no. And the third thing, consumption is okay so long as one doesn't violate Quranic law. Again, that comes back to the whole idea of rijis and ithim. These are my conclusions in regards to alcohol. I am not saying go ahead and drink. I'm not saying do anything. All I'm showing is what does the Quran actually say in regards to alcohol. Assalamu alaikum, and inshallah we'll see you in the next video.